I wanted to talk about emotional intelligence, and when I was pondering what I would share, what I'd talk about, I kind of realized that there is so much to it that I can't possibly put it into a video that will keep your attention for long enough. uh, it's it's going to be done in parts. It's a multifaceted concept, and the way I'm going to break it up is the way in which that I deliver it for my workplace and corporate training. It's an internal public relations training, so it's all about communication and emotional intelligence, and there are 4 aspects of emotional intelligence, and I've broken it up into 4, derived a little bit from Daniel Goleman's work, but with my own putting together of it. And the reason that it's done that way is because they're sequential steps. So one cannot come before the one preceding it. So today we're talking about the aspect or the step of self-awareness. And self-awareness can often be not everyone's, but a lot of people's least favorite aspect of what they want out of this training. So when you're talking about relationally and getting along with people in these contexts and in these scenarios, a lot of people will focus on just wanting to know how they can get along easier with others, maybe to achieve what they want or get what they want from them. So in sales environments, it can be a little bit that focused, not in all, but in some. And sometimes it's just about, how can I make this easier, right? And which is fair, and it's part of the reason why I deliver this training and why I care so much about it, is because we don't need to be as stressed as we are, and our workplaces don't need to be as toxic as they can sometimes be. So the thing is, though, is with emotional intelligence, with this first step, self-awareness, it is really key. We will find that emotional intelligence comes harder to us to practice and harder to us to have by default for us, the less that we practice self-awareness, the less that we focus on or learn about ourselves and become aware of what goes on for us. Because when we're not in understanding of what goes on for us, it makes it challenging to then become in understanding of what might be going on for another person. So in that sense, we're talking about empathy, and I mean real empathy, not empathy where we're trying to take on another person's experience or trauma. I'm talking about empathy where we can maybe relate to how that person might be feeling and connect with them in that way. So if we bring it back to self-awareness, that really means knowing and identifying aspects of yourself, self-assessing what is going on for you, especially in moments of feeling triggered. And that can also come in with self-confidence as well. So I know we're talking about feelings, and before you check out on me, consider that what we feel makes up a lot of our experience of something, right? So when we are feeling something at work, that becomes our experience at work that we identify with. And often we will externalize that, and I understand that feeling of how easy it is to externalize, especially in a workplace environment, especially in a corporate environment. But we can make it easier on ourselves by checking in more with self-awareness. So self-awareness includes understanding what might be a trigger for us, for stress, for overwhelm, for even things like anger and getting pissed off with someone. And I'm not talking about who's right or wrong. I'm not talking about who should have done something and who didn't. I'm just talking about just noticing and understanding and becoming aware of knowing how you might react to certain things. So one activity that I like to bring into this training, but also want to bring into this conversation here, is noticing your breath. And I know that it can be a little bit abstract for some people in the sense of, well, we're breathing, that's not useful to what we're actually talking about. Let's get to the doing, right? I get that. But if we understand what our default breath is, and if we can check in with what our breath does in certain situations, then we can have a better understanding of ourselves and how we are feeling in certain situations. Because a lot of stress we actually may not identify. You know, there's the obvious stress in the workplace of deadlines, and a lot of people that I've worked with have had a lot of end of month stresses because they're in accounting and all of that. So there are the obvious stresses, but then there are also the other stresses that can show up depending on who you are, depending on how you perceive things. So that checking in with your breath is a little bit of self-awareness. So whether I'm in the room with you, or whether you're just watching this, or whether you take this practice elsewhere, it can be really powerful to just notice what your breath is doing by default. As I'm talking, whatever it is, just notice the depth of your breath, the length of your inhale and your exhale, and the pace of your breath. And then slow it down. Deepen it a little. This is just a practice. This is all that we do, is just practice. So that way, when we have moments of triggering, our bodies can more easily show up for us. But if you just slow it down, deepen it, find that equal breath, that belly breath, the diaphragmatic breath, and do that for a few moments. It can be a couple of minutes where that's really just your main focus. It's not going to be all that you're focused on, because we have busy lives and we have busy minds, and it's completely normal that our minds and our brains won't actually really achieve that complete stillness or that complete silence that we so often strive for. But if we allow ourselves to accept that this is what we're focusing on, and it's okay if other thoughts come up, do that. And then what you can do is just notice with self-awareness. If you let go of the breath, then notice what sensations come up. So you might write down, and this is directly from the training, part of the training at least, you might write down what triggers or words that describe something that you're feeling right now, and rate it on a scale of 1 to 10 in intensity, and let yourself, there's a practice in that in itself, and that's acknowledgement. So you're acknowledging what it is you're experiencing. And if you watched the video that I posted about the neuroscience and the feeling brain that Dr. Bessel van der Kolk talks about, if you haven't, I highly recommend you pop over after this and watch it. But if you watch that, we're tapping into that feeling brain and the acknowledgement, because what he says is we cannot change how we feel without learning to come to a state of acknowledgement. And that's what we're doing. So when we acknowledge what these things are right now, that's a practice in itself. And then when we come to a breathing, a pausing, a slowing down, and come back to scale, like rate those things on that scale of 1 to 10 the second time, we usually tend to notice that that scale has lowered in intensity. So what we may have labeled as an 8 in terms of this is a lot for me and it's really stressing me out, once we then allow ourselves to simply pause and be with that feeling or that experience, whether it's a physical feeling that shows up, even if it's an emotion or a label that we have a label, it can show up physically in our bodies, but however we get to be with it, even if it's just acknowledging mentally and going, yes, okay, that feeling is there, or that stress is there, or this is what I'm experiencing right now, then we're still sitting with it and we're acknowledging it and we're becoming aware. And the more we practice this, the more we become aware of what is going on with ourselves. And over time, or in sequence with a few other inquiring activities, you then get to start to become aware of what your triggers are. So it, like I said, it may not even be something that is specifically bad. It may just be how you perceive it, or something in you that grates against it. So it could be the way that someone walks past and says hello, or says I'm going to lunch, or whatever it is, right? And they may or may not mean it in any particular way, but when you start to notice how you perceive things and how you may or may not get triggered by things, or how you feel about things that happen, that's what makes the difference to just becoming more aware of those things. And the more that we become aware of those things, the less of a trigger they become. They may still be there, depending on how deep rooted they are or why they are there. But it just becomes this self-awareness, so we can understand about ourselves that we may get triggered, or we may get riled up about things at work, about certain things at work. And the more we start to understand that about ourselves, the more we start to realize that other people that we work with, other people in our workplace, may have their own set of those triggers, or those things that maybe just rub them the wrong way for whatever reason. And when we realize that we have those things that we can't quite understand why, we kind of get to the point of, I guess, acknowledging and allowing and understanding that other people may have those things that rub them the wrong way. And even if they don't understand why, and even if we don't understand why, it becomes this more of an understanding because we've learnt that about ourselves. We've become aware of that within ourselves. So in the nutshelliest of nutshells, that is the self-awareness aspect of creating and cultivating more emotional intelligence in any setting, but I guess this is more specific to our workplaces, whether you're in corporate or completely opposite of corporate. It comes down to self-awareness and understanding a little bit more about ourselves and how we function and how we work and how we respond. And then we get to learn that other people will have their own things too. So I'll be sharing the other 3 aspects of our emotional intelligence series here of how we make up emotional intelligence. I'll be sharing them in their own video each as well over the coming weeks. So let me know how you go, and if you discover anything about yourself in this practice, or even in this idea as you start to ponder it for yourself and let it land, see how it tastes in your mouth, you might start to learn things. So if you do, I'd love to hear what they are if you feel up to sharing. I feel like it's always helpful when we share things like this because, you know, we all go through it.